Hello, and welcome to the first episode of Connorpoint, a show where we go from point to point to point. Now, you might be asking yourself, why is Connor standing behind a podium with a couple of toys? And why is he wearing gloves? And my answer to this question is, everything has a purpose, and everything has been thought out on this show. Now, this is episode 1, and we're going to be talking about infrastructure and technology. And here's my thinking. Technology used to be big. It used to be spectacular. And nowadays, it's lost some of that focus. So that's what our first episode is going to be about today, and I hope you enjoy it.
I recently went to Arkansas, and I went through the hills of Arkansas, and it was very beautiful. And you could see the mountains and the farmland and the small towns. It's all still there, but it's in the 20th century. It's like going back in time. At the basis of what technology is to make our lives easier and to improve efficiency. And in that respect, technology has been marvelous at doing that and being able to create civilizations and being able to build great nations. The interstate system, the railroad system. Imagine all the time it took for the pioneers. It took 6 months for the pioneers to travel the Oregon Trail to get across the country. Now that process was sped up so much faster by using the railroad. When it was invented, it only took a week or a few days to get across the country. So that kind of technology has been stopped. We don't see a lot of it today, and today most of technology is the next messaging app. We need a return to form of technology, reshaping landscapes. And I mean literally reshaping the landscape and how we travel and how we navigate the world. And to some extent, that was going on with the space shuttle and the Apollo missions, but that all has ceased today. It's amazing because we have so much potential. Technology is supposed to create new rivers of navigation through the world. Technology today makes navigating the river easier. But when real technology comes into play, when we get really big changes, technology actually creates new rivers for navigation. Places you would never think you would be able to go to are now plausible ways of navigation. Most recently, Elon Musk has been doing a lot of good things, and he is one of the great minds of the 21st century because he builds things, something that we need to do again. Build things. One of the ideas that he has done successfully is creating rockets that can land on barges, making that a cheaper thing. You know, it used to take $2 billion for the space shuttle to launch every time it launched. Now, with these reusable rockets, we can deploy them for a few $100,000 because they don't throw away the giant rockets. You know, the Apollo missions and the space shuttle, those giant rockets they used, they would just throw them away. Throw them into the ocean, who cares? They wouldn't be reused, and that's where the majority of the cost came from. Elon Musk is innovating, like how technology should be innovating. And it takes someone like Elon Musk to dream up big stuff. One of the things he has inspired a lot of people to do is look at the Hyperloop. It has been in the news, where the Hyperloop is essentially an airplane without wings mixed with a train inside a vacuum tube. And this thing can travel inside the tube at 500 to 700 miles per hour. And it can travel insane speeds. This is one of the ideas he has pioneered. Now we have companies that are actually implementing his ideas. And there have been design contests for the design of the Hyperloop train, and we've seen incredible progress. There is a company called Hyperloop Technologies that has demoed a new propulsion system. In Japan, they have bullet trains, and they have high-speed trains there. And that is something that the United States should have. The Europeans have it, they have their bullet trains. The Chinese, they have their bullet trains. Japan has their bullet trains. It's a 21st century technology in the sense of technology that is mobile and is reshaping the landscape of how people are living their lives. It is one of the key transformational technologies that is key to any 21st century civilization. We have seen these countries have it, but the United States doesn't. There have been a lot of pushes to build a high-speed rail system in New York and in California to even have a transcontinental bullet train. But it never got off the ground because people wanted to make up excuses for not building it. You know, people are cynical when they say it's too expensive. I've had multiple conversations with people saying, why don't we build a Hyperloop? And people go, oh, well, it's too expensive. Those cost a lot of money, and we don't have a lot of money. But yet, we spend billions of dollars on other things that we don't need, like tanks that we don't need. They're just sitting in giant fields. There's all kinds of wasteful spending. We don't actually build anything brilliant anymore, which needs to change. We need to change this mindset. We actually need to build things. If we would have built a bullet train back in the turn of the century, it would have already been paid off for by now, and it would be creating more jobs. The problem is we have become cynical about infrastructure spending, and the last time we built anything that was great was the Apollo mission to the moon and the space shuttle. We have this company that is building a Hyperloop, and they've showed us a prototype in the desert. It looks wonderful and fantastic, but I am very skeptical and concerned that they will not be able to establish a national transportation grid because historically, when we look at new technologies that are coming around, it has come from the government. The government is the only entity to which can take the largest risk to make these types of technological leaps possible. Sure, Steve Jobs created the iPhone and spawned in a new generation of mobile technology, but if it wasn't for the space program, the miniaturization of processors and GPUs inside computers would not have happened, making the iPhone a very unlikely invention. If we only rely on private companies, it is going to take decades or 20 years to build it because they don't have the funding and it is very hard. There are many points of failure for a company like this. One thing goes wrong and the whole thing goes down the tube. And then no one's going to be able to invest in it anymore because they'll say, well, you know, that company tried it one time and it failed. And it takes strong leadership, someone from the government to do. Unfortunately, the government really can't build anything successful anymore. But if we built the Hyperloop, it could be the key to opening the door to solving this problem. Think about it. No country in the world has this technology. China, Japan, Europe, none of them have the Hyperloop because it has never been done before. It's something brilliant, a brilliant idea. If it was enabled, it could replace long-range travel between cities. You know, I think airports have their place as a means for international travel. You know, if you need to fly to Europe or China, the airport is the best place to do that. But do we really need airplanes that are flying from New York City to Washington, D.C.? No. Trains are far more efficient at doing these types of travel, and the Hyperloop fits that puzzle perfectly. That's where they have high-speed trains in Japan and China. They're going between cities. Now let's imagine we have a Hyperloop from New York City to Syracuse, and it only took 15 minutes. All of a sudden, you could have people living in Syracuse taking the Hyperloop on a daily basis to New York City. Now we could have millions of people living outside. I mean, you know, this already happens with people living outside New York City, but I mean really living outside New York City and traveling to the city for work. Imagine an entire state with the Hyperloop. Think about this. You could have an entire state with one city, and everyone works in that one city, but they actually live in the outskirts of the state. And remember this, the Hyperloop can do more than just transport passengers. It can also transport cargo. They could actually be putting the shipping containers that they put on semi-trucks inside the Hyperloop. It would just speed everything up. And if we think of civilization kind of like a body, you need faster ways of transporting oxygen to your cells. The Hyperloop is transporting people and goods in a faster way than the current infrastructure of cars could ever do. One of the most innovative things about the Hyperloop, compared to maglev technologies in Japan, is the tracks themselves. In conventional maglev technology, you need a power source on the side of the track to power the track. The power source activates the electromagnets that push the train and allow it to levitate. But the innovation they have done with the Hyperloop is actually building the power source into the train itself. There's no power source needed for the track. So it's a much more cheaper and efficient way to build the track for the Hyperloop. You know, I loved seeing the mountains in Arkansas. But if someone would have told me that in the year 2016, I would still be going up an Ozark mountain to get to Arkansas, I would have called them crazy. I would have told them by now we would have had a futuristic way of flying there. We would have had flying cars. And you know, it's kind of like going through a third world country in some of these places. Our infrastructure has become dysfunctional. And here is the hypocrisy. People act like you're Jar Jar Binks if you even suggest that we should build something like the Hyperloop. There is all this talk about how we want things. We want improvement in our lives. And yet some people will get mad at you if you even suggest we build a Hyperloop or a high-speed train. And guess what? We've already made this mistake before. Remember when we were supposed to build the Super Collider? The money had already been allocated by the government to build the largest atom smasher in the world. Yet we stopped building it and allowed the Europeans to build it. Now they are pushing physics with their Super Collider called CERN. My point is, the Hyperloop is the train of the future. And I'm glad that some people are trying to build it in the United States. But it's going to need some funding from federal sources if it is really going to get built and have the tracks that are laid throughout the entire United States. And the scary thing is this: if it fails and it doesn't get built in the United States, I guarantee you that the people in Japan and China and Europe will love to hire the engineers that we have working on the Hyperloop. Because guess what? They would love to build it. They would put up the capital and the money to build it. But in the United States, it's still a question if that would actually happen. Until we start making these types of investments, we cannot have the expectation that we are going to maintain our position as a leading world power. Technology is supposed to have a wow factor, and it's supposed to bring people together and unite them by having a common interest and a common goal that is going to help everyone. And that is what brings a nation together.
Now, I should say that this has been a lot of fun for me, but why don't we ask our fellow friends here what they think we should do? What do you think we should do, Mr. Skeleton with the rockets?
I think we should blow shit up with my rockets on my back.
You think we should blow things up? No, we can't do that. What do you think we should do, TC-14 from Star Wars Episode 1?
I'm TC-14 at your service. My opinion is of no consequence. However, my intuition suggests we build a new fleet of spacecraft to travel the solar system and begin new colonizations of the Martian land.
You want to build a spaceship? We don't have the money to build a spaceship. We need to build the infrastructure first.